care and feeding of your daily practice, and our topic for tonight is going to be working with obstacles. So why don't we start with a minute or two of shamatha, just let ourselves settle in here.
Welcome. Well, welcome to everybody. Last week we worked on sympathetic joyride last week.
Yeah, finding joy in the practice, finding inspiration.
Equanimity this week.
That's right.
So how was your practice last week?
A lot of pursed lips and nodding heads. How was your practice last week? What did you work with?
Yeah, my practice was interesting. So I've been thinking of doing this Chenrezi this whole time. And there were a couple of times when I didn't do Chenrezi for reasons of wanting to do other practices. So that was interesting. I confess that I didn't keep my commitment to that. But on the whole, it's interesting to do a practice like Chenrezi, which I haven't done continually. There's a quality of trying to keep in my head the idea that everybody has Chenrezi on their head when I see them. That'll be interesting. I work at home, so I don't get to see people. I'm not out in the world that often, which is a kind of a downside for that whole thing, which is why I was a couple of times last week not doing Genraisy. But you know, it's new practice to be doing every day, and that always has the virtue of being fresh and lively. So it's easier to kind of carry the practice in my head. I don't know. How about yours? I throw it back at you. I'll give you the hot potato.
Yeah. Well, the kind of the theme with last week's class was looking for the things that feed your practice. And I did. Oh, I don't have it with me. It's in my bag. I did find an image of Vajrasattva and loaded as the wallpaper on my phone, so that every time I looked at my phone or I got an alert that somebody had posted on our Instagram feed, I would see that image, and it was really helpful to me, just having that little reminder throughout the day. And whenever I saw it, I would try to do just a one breath shamatha, just kind of be aware for a moment, and that was really pleasant. It was nice to have those little touches of practice throughout my day. Yeah.
So I've had a daily practice for a while, but having come to these classes, it's like the carrying practice, it comes to mind more often about things we've talked about here. So that's been really nice. I feel like more I'm carrying Genraisy with me, or just carrying the practice with me. Different things will whatever we talked about here it'll come back through again and remind me of things. So I found that to be really helpful. It feels more constant. Yeah, I like that. And I was inspired by your doing Genraisy every day, so I decided I would do that this week, and I almost made it, but so then when I did miss, it was like, why am I going away? Should I be doing this every day as a discipline? And so looking at that, how am I with discipline like that? It seems to come up to me now and then. So yeah, it was really helpful this last week.
Did you discover anything about the discipline question?
No, it's just more question about it, like, because I hear different teachings. You want to keep it fresh. You want to be inspired, but yet I know there's a process that you go through as you do something for a long period of time too. So yeah, no answers.
Yeah, sometimes it's just good to hold the question.
I had an unusual, couple of opportunities, which turned out to be opportunities, and was appreciative of the different postures that you can do meditation in, because lying down ended up being one opportunity. I have MS, and I've been involved with a couple of studies at OHSU, which ended up landing both last Wednesday and then this morning, were 2 full hour and 15-minute MRIs, which my husband he goes, why would you ever agree to do that? He's got claustrophobia. And so you're there, and I just used the sounds and the experience to be just as part of the meditation. I had this really incredible quality meditation, just like sort of, I can do this here, and the technician was very impressed with how still I was. So anyway, it was like, so yeah, it was kind of like, oh, well, this doesn't have to be an interruption. Because it was like, oh, I already have to get up so early. I'm not going to, I'm not going to in my practice. Oh, well, I have this time. And I'm not going to be interrupted by phone calls or anybody needing to perform. I'm not needing to perform. I'd love to just use that as an opportunity.
New meaning to horizontal meditation.
There you go, right.
Yeah, Peter.
Haven't had any trouble doing a daily practice. I kind of wonder from its habitual nature whether I'm doing the right things or paying the right kind of attention. Until this year, I probably did a daily practice pretty close to 360 days a year. So far this year, there are probably at least 8 days when I haven't. And on the one hand, I feel sort of comfortable that I don't feel horribly guilty about that. And on the other hand, I say, gee, if it's this easy, what's the future hold to not? So,
What's the future hold in terms of like? Is
well,
it,
if it's
is it
this
going
easy
to,
not to, what's the future hold in
Oh.
terms of the
got it,
consistency of my daily practice?
got
And you referred to look at what feeds my daily practice. I don't know of anything that feeds or doesn't feed my daily practice. I just do it.
Hmm. That's very interesting. Everybody's different, and I'm doing the math in my head, and I'm thinking, so a lazy year for Peter is missing 24 days. I could step up and have my best year ever, and it would be a lazy year for Peter.
So did you have an empathetic joy for him?
I had marveling.
Do you and your wife practice together? This is kind of a curiosity question. You two have different times of the day that you practice. So, how about Chris, your wife's?
Yeah, Alita practices. I have any idea what her practice is like. I know it includes journaling,
Okay.
and I think it includes reading, but I have no idea how closely it does or doesn't follow Buddhist practices. But
Yeah.
she's much less consistent than I am.
Yeah. Okay.
But when we enlarged our bedroom, we wound up with a small space that wasn't spoken for, and it became our meditation room, and it's very nice to have that.
Yeah.
But it's too small
For
for,
two people.
yeah, really it's too small for 2 people.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do it, it would be really crowded, and we'd be
Yeah.
conscious of one another.
Right. Okay.
And she has kind of a elaborate, from my point of view, altar with various things on it, the meaning of which I don't know, and all I have is Buddha.
Uh-huh. So you do have your own separate altars in, not necessarily?
No.
Okay.
I just ignore hers. And,
Okay.
and actually we have a, what's the Japanese word for Genrezi, I think? We,
Oh, is that Kuan Yin?
Yeah.
Julia gave us one of those, and
Oh, yeah.
it's on the altar too.
Very nice.
Kuan Yin is Japanese. I thought it was Chinese.
I don't know.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But you see Kuan Yin in Zen.
I think Kuan Yin is Chenrezi, but I don't know if it's Japanese.
All right, we won't go there.
I experienced a Kuan Yin statue, I guess would be the word, in Da Nang, Vietnam. And it was like 7 stories tall.
Mhm.
And they had made it in 2013. The Vietnamese government had built this beautiful, let's call it a stupa. And then here's this Kuan Yin statue, and all these people in Vietnamese coming there to practice. Well, that's what they determined, but come and honor the space. It's just lovely. But I guess I'd comment about my practice, that it's what feeds it, what stimulates it. It feels very much like I want to be there. And that's what takes me to the cushion. But I've tried opposite room for doing it different places. And I did try it in the hot tub the other day. I don't know if that counts. But I did shamatha in the hot tub, in the dark. But one piece of my practice overall the last, say, 8 years has been doing Bardo readings. And a friend just died recently. So I began that reading again. And it becomes another piece kind of next to the Vajrasattva practice and shamatha. And it's interesting how it comes and goes, the Bardo reading kind of practice, but there is a piece of that is where I want to go practice, as I think of my friend. In the past, with that part of my practice, others die during that 49 days. And so then the 49 days gets extended again, and then someone else dies and it gets extended again. But it's also very poignant things like the Orlando shootings. That happened, and I think the second to last time I found I did it. But I don't know, there's something that is that gift of moving completely out of myself that practice creates. So it was a good, natural week, I would say, even though I wasn't here with you last. And I did not meditate much that night because my son was here. So I went off that distraction. I would say, too, that I find myself weaving free writing in. I don't necessarily term it my practice, but it feels like it's a form of practicing to write what is coming up. So that's become part of my reflective life, let's say. Dharmic qualities that get woven into it.
Yeah, it can function as a kind of contemplation,
Yes.
A way of helping you kind of get your hands around what's actually going on.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, yeah.
I've been thinking about some of the things you guys have talked about, especially the last couple of weeks. My daily practice is actually Tonglen. I definitely have various Shinei practices, added in, and I essentially lead some at work, although we don't call it shamatha or Shinei, but it's mindful breathing practice that I know what I'm doing, and it's shamatha. But I remember a couple weeks ago you guys talked about the notion of imagining compassion for somebody that you really love, and then for somebody that it's you have sort of neutral feelings towards, and then maybe somebody that you dislike. And I usually don't do that. I usually, like, my Tonglen practice is sort of random. Like, I will sometimes practice for somebody I like, or for somebody I just happen to meet, or one of my patients, or, I try to sprinkle in folks that I dislike. And so just for the last couple of weeks I tried to kind of add those 3 elements into each daily practice. And that's been really interesting to sort of observe how I feel. And then I was just thinking about, I think it was last week, Jeff, you were talking about like how it can be more helpful to imagine the Buddha nature of someone rather than their personality, I guess. And so that's been good. So I've tried to do it because the practicing for people that I dislike, and we talked about Schadenfreude last time, and I realize that's really hard for me. Like sometimes it's, and I know you said something like, don't bother to try to do it for folks that you really dislike. If that's just too hard, like start with the people you like and all that, it'll be easier. But I've been doing Tonglen for long enough that I feel like, I feel pretty acclimated to trying to practice for people that I dislike, and that seems important for me in my practice. It seems like I really can benefit from that. So, so I've added, just lately anyway, since you guys' classes, I've been adding those gradations into that part of my Tonglen practice, and the Buddha nature aspect. Just trying to think about that. That's been helpful. That's been helpful because otherwise, yeah, it's sometimes the best I can do is one taking and sending for someone that I'm not very fond of, and I just sort of do it, and it's challenging. So, but the Buddha nature part, remembering that was helpful lately.
Yeah, Laura,
I don't want to take up the time, but I was going to say one thing that I found help is my friends have been way more receptive to sharing my Dharma experience than I thought. And so one thing that I found really helpful in my practice is to have it continually, have a Dharma idea in my mind throughout the day, and ways of doing that have been sometimes sharing with people, and so they'll be like, well, what'd you do today? Well, I went to this Dharma class, and then, well, what'd you talk about? And then I shared it, and I don't, I'd just be kind of stop talking, but then they actually wanted to know more. And it's I actually, and so I've actually kind of consciously hung out more with those friends that want to talk about those things. I just find myself increasingly more attracted to friends that are Buddhist, or I find are okay with me talking about it, and that really helps. And then that's I get to bring other people into how I'm wanting to see the world and practicing to see the world. And just for me, my practice, just that's all. That helped a lot. So just keep bringing it up places. Make it relevant.
Something on a similar vein. One of the things that I noticed brings me joy. There's actually a couple things that I thought of this week. The main one is that I've noticed that I have more presence for the people that I'm interacting with at times, and that brings me joy because it seems like there's a deeper connection that's made. And something like a work setting that could be pretty mundane, if we don't make those connections, becomes memorable, and things that you kind of build relationships with, and memories over time kind of give me reason to keep practicing. And it's a source of joy that I just, I think I've been ruminating on that a little bit, because I'm also in a relationship, and it comes up that the thing that we can, really the only thing that we can give ourselves is each other's attention. That's the thing that's the most lasting and the most real, the most substantial gift we have, while we're here. And then something I think you said at some point, maybe it was a few weeks ago, it could have been the first class. I noticed this week, I have a cat that likes to come around and do its cat thing while I'm trying to sit still and concentrate. And, you know, I noticed this tendency in my mind to like push that away and to like try and create this silent abyss in my mind. But then I noticed this other part that I haven't accessed a lot, where it embraced that, and it embraced the sound of the traffic out on the wet street and all these other sounds and, you know, sensations that I normally just kind of like push away to access some sense of silence. And I noticed that that's like a controlling thing that I'm doing without even realizing. And once I kind of like scooped all that up, it felt way more alive and enjoyable. You know, it's like hearing them bounce around, and then, you know, having the picture of, you know, my mental picture of the altar next to me and things like that. Just kind of like scooping everything that I could think of, you know, that's around me into my meditation. It's helpful and enjoyable.
That's really nice.
That's a good practice to work with sound, because so often we're distracted by sound and we begin to relate to it antagonistically. And if you start using it as the object of your meditation, it sort of undermines that feedback loop. There was a period of time when I was doing sound as the source of my shamatha, the object of my shamatha, and I had the same kind of experience you had. And then later I noticed, you know, like, this still happens. Our house, all around our house, there's construction constantly. I work at home, so you know, I hear jackhammers and I try to bring my attention to my irritation at the jackhammer and relate to it as something other than just a point of irritation. So,
Yeah, and often in the shamatha instructions we'll hear like we're trying to find the place between too tight and too loose, and that we're not actually meant to tune out everything around us, but to come to a place where we can sit and settle, and our whole experience is present, and we're present with that, and we're aware of it. And so yeah, letting it encompass everything in the room and what's outside on the street and the cat, all of it. I think that was one of those critical moments of relaxing into it, and your practice actually getting bigger as a result. It's nice.
I find just so much is feeding coming here, live streaming the shamatha, and then the Q&As after. I am loving going to the mind training group on every other Thursday or 2 Thursdays a month, and you know, I live stream more than I come here because I live south of here, but it's so interesting. I was live streaming the other night, and all you can see is the teachers, but I heard, you know, people that I know and recognize asking great questions and having great comments, and it's just like it's very supportive and enlivening for me. You know, makes me wonder if I wasn't connected somehow here, you know, how would my practice be? And so I'm just feeling incredibly grateful, and also so grateful for the Lojong teachings. I just, oh my gosh, it's so rich, and I usually will read a slogan or two, or read a small chapter from like Pema Chodron's book, or as I'm settling in before the shamatha, and it's just like,
just spark something right away, and then I want to do shamatha. And so I think that I've been wondering about, okay, so what's the next level of commitment to practice? How does one know if you're ready for that? I feel that I'm in my early 50s, and I feel like, wow, I'm still physically fit. I could maybe do Nundro, and so, but how does one know, like, if you're ready to take something like that up? So I'm kind of living with that question. Yeah, how to deepen things, and when, and if.
Yeah, and I think when you're holding that question, that's a great time to try to sit down one-on-one with a teacher and just explore that, get their perspective on that, and if you need additional instruction to be able to get that one-on-one.
Have something
Yes.
to share. So last class you were talking about thinking of someone that we could kind of relate to the practice of sharing in joy. And so I hope Zoka doesn't mind me using her, but she automatically came to my head because when she talks about Dharma, she's always like, wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one thing. And another thing I noticed about my practice, especially Tonglen, is I can't start with myself first. It's really weird. I have to go backwards. So, I don't know why. Well, I kind of know why, but yeah.
It's good that you get back to yourself, even if you have to
Yeah.
go roundabout. It's important to include yourself there.
Yeah, I've had the experience before where I forgot to do it myself. And I realized, oh wait, that's right, gotta do that part. Really.
Yeah, I don't forget. I don't want to. It's almost like, anyone but me. This is not fun, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the reason I forget. Is that it's not like, not like I'm thinking I want to do it. Yeah.
What happens when you do it?
I guess it's kind of like a sinking feeling at first. It's like a heaviness. And almost like some resentment kind of bubbles up. Don't know why. And then I kind of relax into it. I actually have to do this commentary with myself. It's like, hey, I deserve it too. I'm a human being like everyone else. I'm connected. And I influence other people too. So if I'm not in a good state, like there's a ripple effect. So I have to rationalize, and then I kind of escape the feeling, and then I'm in my head again. So it's interesting.
It's not settling in yet.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, does anyone else have anything they want to share before we move into the topics for tonight? Anyone at home?
Paul.
That's right.
Text?
We need a hotline.
That's right, little Fanny.
That shows how old we are. A hotline.
That's right. They could Skype. Well, tonight we wanted to talk about obstacles, and working with them and finding ways to prevent things that disrupt our practice or a sense of disappointment that we might feel around our practice from derailing us and keeping us from practicing. You know, I don't know about you, but I have certainly many times in my practice career had the experience of turning my practice into one more obligation, you know, one more thing on my to-do list that has to be done. And when it starts to feel like that, it gets really heavy. It's like one more weight that I'm carrying around. I gotta stop at these places on my way to work. I gotta work. I gotta go to the grocery store on the way home. I gotta do my practice. I gotta cook dinner. It's like when it's just one more item on the list, something has really gone wrong in my practice. And I find when I move into that space of it's one more thing I'm checking off, often like a companion piece that comes with it is this sense of I need to be making progress. Like everything else, I'm moving everything along. And so then I start to assess my practice. Like, am I moving? Am I moving forward? And am I making progress? And I think, you know, my experience has been when I get into that sort of place that the thing that doesn't work is tightening down and being more disciplined and being more rigid about the whole thing, because it's actually already pretty rigid. It feels really tight. And the thing that really works is relaxing and lightening up a little bit, and if possible, discovering some sense of humor around the whole thing, especially because it's a hole that I've fallen into again and again over the years. And, so there can be a moment of sort of flipping and looking at it and thinking, oh, wait a minute, I know this thing. I've done this. And it can feel a little absurd. Like, oh, why am I making such a big deal out of this? Like, why am I making this so hard on myself? You know, we're allowed to cut ourselves a break. Just say, okay, wait a minute. I need to hit the reset button here. Like, things are just not feeling spectacular. Like, I just need to cut myself a break and take a breath and stop and kind of go back to the beginning of things. When SCOL was under construction, there was a year where Jeff and I tried to go out there 1 weekend a month and do personal retreat. So the north wing was finished and the south wing was under construction. And there were just a couple of staff living on the land, and we took all of our food. We were completely self-maintaining when we were out there, and we just used the cabins for personal retreats. And not everybody here probably knows this, but we did a long period of service on the board of directors. I did, how many years did you do? Like 10 years on the board?
No, I did 6, but I was president for 4.
Wow. Okay. Only 6. I thought it was longer. I did 7 because I came on not that long after Jeff became president, and then I did 3 years as president of the board. And a lot of it was happening when SCOL was being developed.
Presidential years count as 3, so that's probably
They're like dog years. So there was one time that we were out there, and I was sitting in this cabin the entire, like the whole first day. We set up this thing where we would keep silence, and then was it at lunch or dinner?
dinner, I think.
At dinner we would talk. we would have our meals together throughout the day, but at dinner we'd have conversation. The entire time that day, I was sitting in the cabin, I was problem solving. I was like, man, I can't believe that these floors are unsealed. When are we going to sand these down and seal them up? I really hate the way that curtain is because I have to climb up on my bed to close it. And I don't know why we didn't do them like this. And why do we have shades and they're not light canceling? Like, again and again, like the whole day throughout my practice, I would sit down and I would just be like, and that should be like this, and this should be like this. And then we got together for dinner, and I started to talk about it, and Jeff confessed that he had been doing exactly the same thing. And then we were so wound up, like so caught up in the business of KCC, but also just so wound up in that mental habit of, what do I do? What do I do all day and the rest of my life? I look around and I find problems and I fix them. Like, that's the thing I've trained my mind to do. But I was really suffering it. Like, I was pissed off and I felt like I was having bad practice and squandering my time out there. And then that moment of saying it to him and realizing he'd been doing it, I think we both had a moment of recognition, like, oh yeah, this is so silly. It's okay that it is what it is. It doesn't need to be something else. And also, I don't need to be doing this. I don't have to keep doing this. I could make some space for a different kind of experience to arise. Because somehow, I always find that when I'm able to laugh at something that I'm doing obsessively in my mind, it's like puncturing a tire. It just really, it drains something out of it. It really prevents its ability to keep spinning. So I do really believe that humor is key as we go along on the practice, especially when we're finding that afflictions are arising or obstacles are arising.
Yeah, Michael, if anybody has spent much time with Michael, you see him use this technique a lot. He points to foibles and finds them extremely amusing. And it's nice to be around Michael and watch him model that. He sees the absurdity in doing the same thing over and over again. You know, it's sort of like that. Do the same thing over and over again, you expect a different result. That's really funny if you look at it in a certain way. we meditate all this time and we still obsess over the same things. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I feel like we've had lots of experiences over the years, and probably you have too. Michael will be here for a Q&A, and somebody will ask a question, and he'll just be silent for a minute, and then he'll start to chuckle. And somehow in the moment when he chuckles, like, the whole thing just really lightens up. You find the absurdity in it.
Yeah. It's always easy to find the absurdity in other people's practice. So it's to find it in your own. So kind of related to that is looking at these habits that we have that create this kind of dysfunctional mental habit, which is also just confusion. Excuse me, I'm kind of froggy. When Sally started, she described this pattern that I also strongly recognize of starting to regard practice the same way I regard everything else. It's another thing on the to-do list. And when we do that, the thing about practice that can be really defeating is if we have a transactional nature to it. If we think like, I do my practice, so all these good things will happen. Like that's why I'm sitting down so that I have mental clarity, a better person, whatever it is. This is me speaking. May not have this issue, but on the off chance this sounds familiar. You can start the the human brain probably evolutionarily needed to be transactional, right? Like you needed to, when you saw the cougar, you needed to get away from him, else he would eat you. But all those things that protect us in one way are the things that feed our obsessive nature. And when we begin to think of, we begin to judge our practice based on these kinds of criteria, it becomes very difficult for it to be that source of joy and support that we want. We're judging it in the same way we would judge, our job or our spouse or whether a television show is entertaining.
Yeah, it's almost irresistible. When you finish a session of practice, and I certainly experience a strong impulse to immediately label it. That was good practice or bad practice. That was a successful session or not.
Sally and I have been practicing long enough that if we look at the things we're doing now, and we look at the things we were doing 20 years ago, we can see that there's been some benefit in the practice. It sometimes feels fairly subtle, and sometimes that can feel like a defeat, like, why aren't I enlightened yet? I should be enlightened by now. This is 20 years. And one way to kind of turn this on its head, so, we have a hard time relating to the bigness of the Dharma. And one of the things we hear a lot is the confusion and afflictions that we have come from our karma. And that may be very old karma, like extending back into other lifetimes. And so something may ripen that doesn't seem to have anything to do with anything. So we kind of get that. What we don't so much relate to is this other concept called merit, which is sort of the inverse of that, where we're putting it in the manner that everything we do is mind training. Everything we do is also karma creating. So you're either feeding your confusion or you're putting in the causes that will undermine it. And in Buddhism, that concept is called merit. And the Tibetans actually relate to merit a lot more than Americans. I'm not totally sure why. I think partly it's a subtle concept. I don't know if you have any theories on that.
Well, and merit is not a great translation.
That's true.
I am not a scholar of Tibetan, and if Bill were here, we could ask him in Tibetan merit is sona, and Bill could tell you what the roots are and kind of what the actual concept around that is. And merit, if you look it up in the dictionary, is all about being good or worthy. So it contains this idea of judgment, of morality, which I think is not present in the Tibetan original.
Yeah, in the Tibetan original, I don't know what the linguistic concept is, but if you read about this idea of merit, Buddhists put a lot of stock in the idea that tiny activities can have these fantastically large results. So if you do some practice in one lifetime, it can bear fruit such that in future lifetimes you have all these beneficial things. We don't really, it's funny, we relate to the karma and we get that, which is kind of the negative side. We don't relate to the merit at the positive side, and we don't take celebration in that. And I admit that I have a really hard time with this concept. I've been working with this for 20 years, but I hear about it a lot, so I will confess now that I'm passing along some secondhand wisdom here, stuff I've read, less than I've experienced. The one time I really did have a really palpable sense of merit, Sally put this on our sheet and I took it off, and then as I was looking over her notes, I thought, I'm going to tell that story, it's a really good story. We went to India during this period when we were both on the board, and met with Kempo Lodrodunyo. It was been like about 2006, because both the Rinpoche had died. And that was in a period of time when things were a little bit grim at KCC. We had been involved in the project at the land for, we got that in like the year 2000, but we were nowhere near any kind of long retreats. It was just dragging on and on and on. And the people in the leadership were really tired, and they had, they put a lot of effort into all the activities that went into supporting KCC. They're just running out of gas, and
We had been felt like we had been fundraising forever, and we didn't realize we were only halfway through.
I think we realized. I think by 2006 we realized it. That was part of it. Like, we were starting to have this recognition of, for the first 3 or 4 or 5 years, you can fool yourself into thinking it's just going to get done quick, and then at a certain point, like, it's never going to be done. So we went and talked to Kempo Rinpoche about this, and asked, do you have any words of wisdom for how this, like, what should, I remember asking the question. I was president at the time, so I was tasked with asking questions. This was not a pleasant experience. And I remember the big communication that we all had was, we would just like to be practicing more. We don't want to be screwing around with all this stuff. We feel like we fall in this hole where we're doing all this busy work and not doing practice. And Kempo, he answered it in different ways, but the way that was the most interesting way was, he said, why do you think that the work that you're doing now should make you have all these, like, feel good, or make you feel happy? Like, the thing that you're doing in creating this long retreat is enormously virtuous, and you may not even ever get to do a retreat there. But every little bit of work you do, the benefit is just right there. And why don't you relate to that benefit? How does that not just completely jazz you up? Not really his term, but. And I remember in that moment, it was like, oh yeah, that's right. That's totally true. That's why we did this thing in the first place. I kind of forgot about that. So relating to that work as something other than not practice. So often we have that experience. So.
I gotta say, so I remember this slightly differently, because I was an observer in the room, and some of you will know there's a little bit of a thing in traditional Tibetan culture that if you're asking a teacher for something, often you'll have to ask more than once, and 3 times is often very significant. That you'll ask once, and if you'll get a more superficial answer, and if you're content with that and go away, they know that's all you wanted. And if you keep questioning, at a certain point you'll get the serious answer. And so Jeff had to do this. I don't, like, it wasn't planned out, but I got to do this later when I was president. And when you're asking the question on behalf of the community, you feel like, I got to get something to take back. They're waiting for something at home. And so he got an answer, and it wasn't going to be satisfactory. And so he kept asking. And the 3rd time he asked, I remember Kempo Rinpoche leaning forward and kind of slapping his hand down the cushion and saying, you don't understand the accumulation of merit, or you don't relate to the accumulation of merit. And then he unfolded this whole thing about what our work was and what it meant and how we should relate to it. But it really stunned me at the time. Like, that memory is fixed in my mind.
Yeah, me too. That was a strong memory. I remember it distinctly.
Yeah.
That's a good story to tell.
Yeah, Laura.
Okay, that's come up a lot, and it's really been difficult for me, and I'll do this in all sorts of ways. I get sort of just a nihilistic attitude about, like, how is this meritorious practice? I have a bad attitude, like, it's just materials, like, it's just the altar, like, and that will take over. And that was the case, like, for, like, first 75% of my practice as a Buddhist. I would just there wasn't really a sense of compassion towards these ideas because I didn't like that I couldn't understand it, and I wanted them to just be practical, down to earth, like relate to what I'm putting out, and because I'm serious, I just don't get it, and I get it now, but like you were like, oh, that was just an aha moment, but like I think it takes a lot, in my experience, a lot of study and a lot of thought to understand virtue and what it would mean to accumulate on like a real path. And I mean, that's why I love this class, especially the first class. Like, you just spoke my mind so much. I ended up getting almost angry, actually, like at my Tibetan teachers and things, just like, yeah. So, yeah, anyway, do you have any words of wisdom? Like, I know that's free time. Everyone's free
I think, we don't, Kempo's right, we don't relate to merit, so. We are confused beings, and even when we have good practice, it's confused practice. If we were enlightened, we wouldn't need to do practice. And so we're always constantly judging whether the practice was worth anything, instead of thinking that the very act of doing the practice is itself the merit. It doesn't matter how good it is. The merit is there, and like karma, which something arises and then you scream at your wife, the karma that wheel has been turned. That anger has been put into our mind stream. When we do the practice, we have the merit. You don't have to think, did I earn that merit? Like, was that practice good enough to clear that bar? You just already have the merit.
And I mean, merit is really, it's planting a seed of positive potential. It is planting a seed that will lead to greater and greater benefit arising. And it's sorry, I've got two things competing in my brain simultaneously.
It takes a lot of understanding, though, to see why that practice would contribute to benefit. Like, the understanding, like, I guess, the Four Noble Truths even. Like, I didn't know what I was doing for a long time or why that, because I was too confused in my own suffering and issues to see this is a true path with real refuge that's viable and works. Like, it's just, yeah. So it made me, I guess, angry for a while that I'm in this community of practitioners and they somehow understand and I don't. And it was like that for a while. And I'm just like, aren't I a good person? Aren't I intelligent? Like, how come I can't understand why we're doing this? But I see what you're saying now. And that's why I'm happy to practice, because I can see I have greater wisdom than I did 10 years ago. And it's really wonderful.
Yeah.
I see that now.
And I have a really hard time relating to this too. I want to just emphasize that this is not the way I think. I don't know if I don't want to generalize and say it's not the way Americans think, because I'm not really sure about that. But there's something powerful in at least holding the idea that it works this way, even if I don't quite get there. It has a benefit in my practice in kind of deflating this destructive cycle of judging the practice, which is of course beneficial in its own.
Yeah, and I mean there are a lot of things in the Tibetan tradition or in the Tibetan culture that are labeled as meritorious, and a lot of those I don't really relate to. Like I just don't have the cultural framework for it, and so if you're talking with a Tibetan teacher, they might say do these do these things with your shrine and make offerings and
It just generate resentment.
all of this stuff. It's like, I don't get it. There's nothing, there's no juice for me there. Like, I trust you, so I'm really hoping that this is planting the seed of something good, but I don't necessarily relate to it in the moment. And I remember Michael saying at one point, I don't know why this came up, but his Dharma name is Karma.
Oh, that's right.
Karma Sonam Rinchen. And so Sonam is merit, and he was explaining it, and he said, you know, for a long time in my practice, when I heard that word merit, it just made me want to spit.
Michael always told us, never quote him because you always get it wrong, but I remember it exactly that way. I remember those exact words.
It's a difficult concept, you know. It comes out of this sense of there's a much broader continuum in which our actions play. And when I have struggled with getting to the cushion and struggled with practicing, I feel like I've received the instruction again and again. You're always planting seeds. Like it may feel like a struggle right now. It may not be what you want to do. It may not feel the way you think it ought to feel, but every time you go and sit, every time you engage your practice, every time you contemplate or make aspirations, you are planting seeds, and those seeds do bear fruit. It just doesn't necessarily unfold in the way we expect it to, because it's not so directly transactional. I do this, I get that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it is one of those things that it takes some work to come into relationship with, and like so many things in the Dharma, you're not required to believe it. You're not required to have faith in it. But as Jeff said, there can be real benefit in holding the view. Like, what if? What if every time I do this, it plants a seed of something that is going to be supportive and positive in the future? Well, that sort of carbonates my brain a little bit. That's interesting.
Well, especially if it, like, enlivens the moment of the doing, so you're not asleep to the doing, right? Because for me, it's like if I'm just focused on calculate, like the future point of getting the fruition, then I'm not there in the moment of the doing. So then it just my words. I'm thinking of the slogan, abandon all hope of fruition. So I'm going to do a meritorious action, and while I do it, I'm going to abandon hope of the fruit, like, right? And so what is that to do those things together, right? And so can I experiment with that and see what happens?
Yeah.
And the what if makes me curious, so that I'm there and then I'm like paying attention in the moment. So then that feels like, yeah, of course that would work for me. I do it that way. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are things in the Dharma that we're such cognitively sophisticated people in the United States in 2017 that I think sometimes we outthink ourselves, and we leave. Many people come to the Dharma and they're a little allergic to woo-woo. You know, I want it to be very scientific. I want to be able to see how this whole thing works, and all the things have to line up, and otherwise I'm going to hold suspicion. But sometimes, like, quantum physics looks like woo-woo if you don't really have a good physics mind. And I think what we're talking about here is something like quantum physics, where the subtlety of the practice is real, and you don't have to feel it. It's maybe bigger than intuition. That's all I got. I do feel that. I don't have big confidence in it. I don't relate to it very much. But when I start thinking about it, I think, yeah, I think it's more right than wrong, and I think it's that quantum physics thing, and I know that,
Just because I don't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
yeah. Trying to force it down into this little box somehow seems like the wrong thing as well. So just, I just tell myself, that, remember what Kempo said, remember what all our teachers say, because we really focus on it. It's in every single prayer we do. Merit is everywhere. It's a really big part of the Dharma. So to just edit it out, it seems like maybe a little suspect.
Maybe.
So what pops up for me as a question as you're talking about that is where I get a little stumble with confusion about when is something merit and when is it ego. Where I'm wanting recognition or credit for something that is it merit or is that just this other thing that keeps kind of dragging the mind around a little bit?
In samsara, it's almost never one or the other. It's almost always both. It can be a meritorious action, and you're planting a positive seed, and right along with that can come the desire to make it about the ego. Ooh, aren't I a great practitioner? What am I going to get from this?
It's almost like the ego smells it out.
What was the word?
Smells it out, like it tracks us in. I smell something good and juicy here. Let me take it from
It's like the cat hearing the can opener or something. Something tasty coming.
Yeah, I thought of that too when we were putting this in there. The ego is strong and clever and figures out ways to horn its way in. So easy. I think it would be a great question to ask of one of the teachers. I would like to know the answer to that. I have theories about how those two things work and how to work with those two things and how to do all that. I may take that to a Sunday and see what somebody says.
That's okay. We should take a little break here, but did anybody have anything they feel a burning need to say before we grab a cup of tea? All right, so let's try to have a brief break and come on back. Enjoy yourselves at home.